Pues buenos días a todas y a todos, también a
Good
aquellos que
morning,
nos estén
everyone.
siguiendo por
Those of
internet.
you who are
Para aquellos
here
que
and
siguen
those
mejor,
of you who
tenemos
are
más de
following
100
us online, we
personas
have
inscritas que nos siguen
more
online,
than 100
de más de
people
20 países,
that have
tanto de Europa
registered
como de
to
América Latina.
listen to us
Y
online in Europe and the Caribbean and Latin America. You can follow us online on the YouTube channel, both in English and Spanish. This is the second day of this working group, EU-LAC relations, certainty in the light of the common global challenges. Yesterday we talked about the recommendations, the roadmap created by the summit in Brussels in July last year. We talked about multilateralism, trade, global gateway, digital transformation, green transition, climate change, security, and safety and justice. And another important summit is the Latin American Summit that took place last week in Cuenca in Ecuador. We have the ambassador here. Thank you. And we will be talking about that. That's why we have José Frederico Ludovice, the Deputy General Secretary of the SEGIB. He will be talking about the results of that summit and the analysis of this 28th summit that took place in Cuenca, in Ecuador. It was about fundamental topics such as innovation, inclusion, and sustainability. So welcome, Mr. Ludovice. You have the floor. Thank you. First of all, thank you, dear Director of the Yuste Foundation, Juan Carlos Moreno Piñero. And this is very important for me, being here in Guadalupe is such an iconic place in Spain. It's a great pleasure. This is the region where Charles V spent his last years. He was the great leader of the world of his time. And at the end of his life, he said, his Gloria Transit Mundi. He was very smart and clever. And we know that he understood that he had to get rid of his powers and understand that most things in life are not really important. They are like very transient. So going back to the Cuenca Summit, and Wilmer Andrade, who was there, the ambassador was also there during that work. My intervention has the following structure. First, the context of the summit. It wasn't very easy, as you might imagine. There was a problem, maybe a problem with dates for the organization that had some consequences. I also want to talk about the situation of the diplomacy in Ecuador. We are all aware of it. I don't want to talk about politics because it's not my job. Well, there was some security problems, regional tensions. But even so, I will be talking to you about the commitment of the Latin American community and about the works of that community, both at a political and at an operational level. And then what's coming next? It also depends of the Spanish side. Carmen, the ambassador, will talk about it, I'm sure. So that's the framework for my talk. I would also like to thank the authorities of Ecuador for organizing the summit, also the Foreign Office and the SPT in Ecuador, and the colleagues. I would work with Jaime Berberes, the deputy minister. It was a very complex situation, and he led all the work of the national coordinators in a very professional way. So the pro tempore, the interim Secretariat of Ecuador, was marked by the change of term, the change of office because of the government, the term of the office, Guillermo Lasso, and then the arrival of Daniel Novoa in November 2023. The new administration, the new cabinet found the summit and the motto already defined. The concept note was already defined, and the timeline was already defined by the previous government. So, of course, they had to stick to it. So, there was a complete change of teams inside the government, which, of course, didn't make it any easy for the work to move on. There were many meetings that were already scheduled. There was also some problems with the dates. SEGIB talked about it with the SPT because the dates that we have chosen all clashed with other dates. The summit took place on the 15th of November under the circumstances. And at the same time, there was the high-level week of the APEC in Lima, and then the G20 summit. So this prevented the leaders from such countries as Peru and Brazil to attend our summit, the Cuenca summit. That is the reality, and well, these things happen. And then we have to talk about the diplomacy, the diplomatic situation in Ecuador. We all know that we have some incidents with Mexico. There were some clashes in April 2024. The practical consequence is that there was a complete rupture of the diplomatic relations between Ecuador and Mexico, and then with Nicaragua and Venezuela. Those three countries, of course, declined the invitation to the summit. However, their absence in the summit didn't mean that they didn't take place in an active role in the reports and the communication, which shows that they have a deep commitment with the Latin American community. So they didn't go to the summit because of the diplomatic situation. There was also some security problems which were unimportant, but they were flagged by the Ecuador chancellor during the press conference when she said that some mandatory said that they couldn't attend the summit because there were some security problems in Ecuador. I did not feel that security in Ecuador, but I'm not a chief of state or maybe an important target. But well, this is a quote. This is something the chancellor said. What about the regional tension or strains for the last year or the last 2 years? There was some regional problems that we all know. I'm not comment that. I'm not going to make any remark between Mexico and Spain. Between Venezuela and Argentina, there was a whole process. There was an election in Argentina that caused kind of a turmoil with several, or a clash. Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Panama, and Peru. And the results of the elections, as announced by President Maduro, the light of the elections created a very complex issue because he didn't know he ignored the results. There was also an incident between Argentina and Spain. The ambassador in Argentina, it was about the ambassador in Argentina and the words by President Milei that were not welcome in Madrid, and the Spanish ambassador to Buenos Aires had to leave. I think there are some improvements in the relations between Spain and Argentina. It's going little by little back to normal because fortunately, Argentina and Spain have a very solid and strong relationship. And I think they can move it to another stage of the process. I hope. There were some problems between Brazil and Venezuela because Lula somehow vetoed Venezuela from entering the BRICS in October 2024. Also between Argentina and Cuba, that led to the expelling of Trina Mondino because of the embargo to Cuba. There was also an underlying problem for that summit that maybe prevented us from having like a normal declaration at the end of it. So all these intertwined topics split the international community in two sides, and also many countries in the Latin American continent. We have some underlying questions and issues that are not related to the specific questions that need an answer. There was, this is the ongoing situation in Ukraine and the recent U.S. elections, conflicts between Israel and Palestine. Of course, these are breaking points. Each country has its own opinion. We have many differences among us. And then I would like to talk about the second item, the commitment with the Latin American community, because even if there are certain factors against certain problems that I have just described, all the leaders insisted on their commitment with the community, manifested through several aspects. For example, they might not seem important, but they are. For example, paying the dues to the SEGIB. The percentage of payment is around 94%, which shows that it can continue working. This is a situation that is appreciated. The second positive factor is the participation in the previous process, because all the countries took place in the meetings, the preparatory meetings for the summit, before the approval of the summit, for example, the declaration. Well, there was a political declaration, special communications, and the action plan, which is critical for the working of the SEGIB. And then the third item is the approval of instruments. We voted on our budget, which is mandatory, and some other plans that were approved by a consensus, which shows the willingness of the countries of this community to keep on working in spite of the political differences that I just described. Even if there was no necessary consensus for the declaration, and at the end, only 19 countries signed it, included Venezuela, which didn't attend the summit. Well, we managed to adapt a declaration in the framework of the summit that highlights the importance of the community. The main topic was Article 5, the embargo to Cuba, where Argentina and Cuba didn't reach an agreement. And that stopped or paralyzed the whole declaration. What about the important interventions? There were many interventions, many speakers in the Chancellor's meeting and in the plenary meeting of chiefs of state and of government. They insisted on the importance of protecting the Latin American acquis and the need to protect the community as a valuable space for dialogue and cooperation, which is very positive in my opinion. Then about participation. In spite of everything, in spite of all, even if the summit had a low level of presence of chiefs of states, all countries sent representatives except the 3 countries that I mentioned earlier. In spite of the differences between the delegations, none of them draw from the negotiation process. No country threatened to withdraw from the community, to leave the community, like what happened in COP25, where the Argentinian delegation withdrew from the negotiation process. The third item here is about the work of the Ibero-American community. There are 2 levels, the political level and the operational level. The operational level is a strict responsibility of the SEGIB because it's the permanent body for institutional, technical, and administrative support for the Latin America community. And it is working normally. We are honoring the mandate, the summit, especially the Santo Domingo summit, to the implementation of the Ibero-American Charter of Principles and Rights in digital environments, the environmental chart, the critical route for food security, and the special communication on international financial architecture. We're also promoting the programs, initiatives for Ibero-American cooperation decided by PIPA after the approval in Cuenca of the first cooperation initiative for the development of video games, 31 so far. We are working on an intense activity and many projects for priority spaces in Latin American cooperation for knowledge, culture, social cohesion, for example, gender, environment, innovation. We are working with the Ibero-American networks. In our registry, we have 25 networks, and 2 networks are now in the process of becoming members before the end of this year. And there have been many meetings that enrich the cooperation between local governments, civil society, for the first time with the support of the UCSI. And during the Spanish SPT, we need an institutionalization of parliament meetings, for which we have already done some processes. We reinforced the role of operators in Cuenca. There was the creation of the Ibero-American Center for Development Administration as an advisory body, and now India has applied to become a social observer. What's next? I think Spain was chosen by a consensus, was elected to be the next pro tempore secretariat, the next SPT, and all of the countries said that the Spanish pro tempore secretariat will be a success. And this is very important at this critical point of time. Spain needs to be leading this because it will be attractive. It can attract many more bodies and people. The action plan approved by the summit will be used as a roadmap for the work of the SEGIB for 2 more years so that we can guarantee our operations. SEGIB will continue to implement the mandates coming from the Santo Domingo Summit, digital, environmental, food security, financial architecture mandates, and all of this coming from the Cuenca Action Plan, youth employment, title and degrees recognition, security, among others. And now we have a proposal for a regional posture for the next meeting on development, financial development in June 2025. And now the third action plan for 4 years is fully executed, Patsy, which guarantees that Ibero-American cooperation will keep on working, will keep on being implemented based on what the countries themselves have agreed upon. So this is the possible result of these summits. And I don't want to use this kind of journalist language, success, failure, etc. No, this is really complex and has many nuances. So we have to take into account the difficult context, regional and world context. But of course, we also need to understand that the Spanish SPT will keep on working hand in hand with us so that we can have a great 2026 summit that will be very successful, that will keep on feeding this fruitful relationship in this family of Ibero-American countries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ludovice, for this presentation where you exposed all the more controversial aspects that may be considered as something that is not positive, as you mentioned at the end of your presentation. You were not trying to be journalistic, but realistic. And I think we all understand the current circumstances and how difficult the agenda of these days is. There have been countless international meetings that make the agendas of the different heads of states and politicians to be hard to handle with all these different circumstances. We want to keep and retain this positive message. There has been a statement that was supported by a large majority of the participants with the inclusion of new observers that are very powerful. So the hope is that we will be able to keep improving in the next summit. However, we will keep addressing this topic in the next panel. We're going to take a very short break to change the panel, and we're going to invite the panelists of this next segment of the morning.